Alright, so I just finished up my morning cold plunge, or the broke man's cold plunge, because I drive down to a creek, because I don't own one of those fancy ones that swirls and stuff. Maybe one day, that's the goal. But yeah, just finished that. It's still kind of weird, just like sitting in a pitch black creek at 5 a.m. in the morning, but it feels really good. It really does. And my car is fortunately pretty warm afterwards, so that's all good. Anyways, yeah, I thought that I normally have some sort of clear cognitive processes in the morning, especially after submerging myself in freezing cold water. That's mainly, well, part of it's cold exposure releases the catecholamine, so dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, or adrenaline, noradrenaline. That's a whole story, why it's two different names but the same thing. Anyways, it just gets you moving. And the reason I'm uploading this is because I sometimes have a good clear thought in the morning. And the first clear thought is do something similar to I do, as in cold water exposure, like first thing in the morning. Or do cold water exposure when you are procrastinating. And I'll tell you why. The reason you want to do cold water exposure is, to be honest, for people who aren't used to it, and even for our people who are used to it, there's nothing harder than just like getting in a cold shower, or getting in a cold creek, or cold ice tub, or whatever. It's just not in our human nature. Like, we want to be comfortable, warm, and cozy. We're just not used to that shit. So my recommendation is really the only way that you can overcome procrastination or do something that you don't really want to do. And for me, sometimes that's schoolwork in the morning. Like, I don't want to wake up and work for an hour and a half. That sucks, right? Sometimes it doesn't. It's really rewarding. I actually enjoy my schoolwork most of the time, but there's some days like where I'm typing along literature review and I'm doing a lot of research. I'm like, oh, that's just kind of mind-numbing. I don't want to do this today. And the way to do that, which I've heard on the Huberman podcast and I've kind of ingrained into my routine and I've shared with other people and it's helped them as well, is the only way to really overcome procrastination or overcome doing something hard is do something harder than the thing you're procrastinating doing. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but it does make sense, right? Because normally what happens is, do I have like something I can use for an example of this? Yeah, I can. So what happens is dopamine, so like pain and pleasure is always on like, let's see, can I balance this? Pain and pleasure is always like on a scale, right? So on one side you have pain and on the other side you have pleasure, all right? So if pleasure, right, so let's say we eat some really good junk food like a chocolate bar. Pleasure comes in and sits down. It's gonna really go down, tons of pleasure, right? And then pain's just out here chilling, not doing anything, but eventually it has to balance back out, all right? It's homeostatic. That's how our body works. We want to stay balanced out. So once that happens, our body starts bouncing back out and it actually tilts up the other way entirely. Now you have tons of pain and no pleasure. So what do? We eat another chocolate bar to get it back down. And then it comes back up. So then we scroll on social media, right? So the way you can avoid kind of like the crash of feeling pain or lack of dopamine per se, because that's normally what happens, is like you're scrolling on social media and you're just like filling your head with a bunch of nonsense that you don't really need, right? Let's see if we can get back to it. Social media, pleasure, but not really, right? And we're filling it. As soon as we shut it off, super painful. And you're like, oh no, this sucks. Let me like get a snack or something and then you start procrastinating more. Let me do this. And you're just always trying to like numb the pain, but also you have the lack of dopamine, which is an anticipatory mechanism that actually gets us to move forward and do things. So you lack that and you're in a painful state. The only way you can really overcome that is doing something harder than you have to do. So that's cold water exposure. And the reason cold water exposure is great for this is because what happens with cold water exposure is, remember, pleasure, pain. Cold water exposure is momentary pain, very brief, like 3 minutes max. All right, you don't need that much. And it goes quick. All right, so what happens is it's a huge dump and our body needs to overcome it. So what happens? It actually shoots a ton of, oh, you see that? It shoots a ton of pleasure. It shoots a ton of dopamine. And the wonderful thing about this is with cold water exposure, pain here, pleasure here, when pleasure comes back in, pleasure actually comes in fast, but stays in. And it returns super slowly over like 4 to 6 hours to baseline. So the reason why cold water exposure is so great for you is because that painful exposure that's very brief is going to activate your reward system, your dopaminergic system, for a prolonged period of not only anticipatory movement forward to do things, to get your body to do things, but you're also just going to feel happy as shit for a really long time. I mean, they've done studies with this, and it has one of the longest prolonged exposures of pleasurable feelings and dopamine, equivalent to the feeling of love. And it actually is in the same line of a dopamine response as sex and some drugs. And it's very brief. Like, hop in a cold shower when you're feeling like shit and you're just like doom scrolling because you don't want to face the world, or you're just like eating more shit because you don't want to face the world, or you're just like, one more episode. Just turn it off. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Activate instead of the emotional limbic system, the frontal cognitive system, by counting backwards. And then as soon as you do one, take action. Take the cold shower. Momentary pain. All right, momentary pain, but then tons of pleasure. It returns to baseline after 6 hours. You get a lot done. You're happy as shit. You feel good. You have a wonderful day. You feel proud of yourself. All that good stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. I've been doing it for a while. It works for me. And there's neuroscience to back it up. So if I didn't explain it good enough, go to Huberman Podcast. We'll explain it. How to overcome procrastination. All right, peace.